Is that a reason? So I know I asked you earlier why you're speaking publicly now. What's the reason you've never spoken before? And maybe going back and maybe you could describe the early days when your father was arrested. Where were you when you heard about it? What first came to your mind? Did you expect it? Did you expect it? I know you already said you wouldn't expect it to take this long. I'd love to know this first, why not spoken publicly before? And the early days of the first arrest and release, because there was massive protest, and arrested again when everyone just kind of slowly quieted down.
So we've always been quite private people. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where our father never wanted us to be in politics. We were never interested in it anyway, and so it made sense to just live a more quiet life, and that was a good element of living in England, is that we didn't have to live quite so much in the public eye. But I remember very vividly where I was when he got arrested. I was about to give at the time the biggest speech of my life for my startup, for Mifu, and I was about to get on stage and speak to about 100 people, and as I was preparing for it was about an hour and a half before. My business partner, I see him go pale, and he shows me his phone, and I see that he's been arrested. And at the time, we have quite a thick skin with this kind of stuff. We've seen him get shot. We've seen him get arrested multiple times. We've seen him, he's sat us down and told us he's going against mafias in Pakistan. We're quite used to this kind of thing. So when it happened, frustratingly, I remember I saw it and I just thought how trivial my speech is, even though it was the biggest speech I could possibly give at the time. And I went up and my head was in the clouds and I fluffed my lines, but we ended up doing okay. But what really stuck out is at the time even though it shook me, I had no concept of how long it would be. I really thought it would be a couple of months maybe maximum. But this time, it turned out it's nearly 2 years now, and he's been in solitary confinement the entire time. So yeah, it's been pretty brutal.
Suleiman, well, okay, those early days, your expectations, and where we are today.
Yeah, so I remember as well where I was and my reaction, but it wasn't actually a shock to me because I'd actually spoken to him a few days before, and he'd warned me that there was a strong possibility that he was going to be arrested. But he'd been arrested earlier that year on the 9th or after the 9th of May kind of protests, and he was released a few days later. So I was hoping that it would be a similar situation, yeah, and I just wasn't expecting him to still be in prison now, almost 2 years later.
When he was made that offer, sorry, go ahead, Qasim.
I was just going to say, the very night before, just remembered, the very night before it happened, I was messaging him about advice for public speaking because I was so nervous about speaking to 100 people. And then in the morning, funnily enough, he was taken.
It's just honestly, it's heartbreaking what you guys are going through. At first, I also respect, especially considering Pakistani politics, how always kids are groomed to kind of follow in their father's footsteps. And we've seen that in politics for decades in Pakistan. So to see you guys, first, the way Imran Khan has kind of moved you away from politics, so essentially protected you, considering how dangerous Pakistani politics is. And to see how humble you guys are. When we met Qasim, I told you that, I was joking about it, how humble you are in general. And to see you guys speak publicly now in support of your father, knowing how brutal and aggressive Pakistani military or Pakistani government have been against anyone speaking out in support of your father, is something that I respect massively, and I really appreciate that you're doing this. I do want to ask you the question though. When he was offered the opportunity to go under house arrest to get out of jail, did he ever ask you guys? Is the decision always made, or did he ever ask you, do you think I should accept the deal? Did he ever seek that advice from you guys, or do you know if he's actually asked anyone else in your family about this?
I don't think he would ever. I just don't see him taking a deal like that. To save his skin. He's a very principled person, as I said. He's comfortable there as long as his mission is being fulfilled, and I don't think he'll just take a deal while other people are sitting in cells on his behalf, his supporters, I don't see him, running off to his house where he's in pseudo prison.
Another thing I think people would be very curious about is those calls you have with your father. You talked about him sharing some wisdom, especially with all his readings in jail and things he's learning. Can you tell us some more? And obviously, I'm sure some things are private, but kind of give all the people that are supporting your father and that believe strongly in his cause and have risked their lives on the streets in the protests last year. How are those discussions? What are certain things? What do you think are messages he'd like the world to know as well beyond your private conversations?